This is the Voice of Freedom.
My Daddy's Station. I'm Pooh, classic radio like you always wished it could be. 101.1 FM, Eager.
Miss Allison is making her presence known in the studio right at this present time. You can hear her, ladies and gentlemen. A while ago she was in here dancing, and now I saw her run in here out the corner of my eye, chased by her mother, and refuses to be removed from the studio. And that was what the squeals were all about. That's okay. She's my daughter. I love her, and she can stay here as long as she wants. Right, baby? She gives me that look with those big, beautiful eyes. Whoa. Now you can stay, but you gotta control the yelling. Hi. Welcome back, folks, to this memorial broadcast honoring the careers and accomplishments of J.P., the Big Bopper Richardson, Richie Valens, and, of course, Buddy Holly.
I'm changing all the things that I made when I left you, because I made those things when I thought you were true. But now you're gone, I found my wrong, there's nothing I can do except to clean up all the things that I made when I left you. Stop to think I just left it out of care. And now I know you're gone, I am finding you anywhere. I should have recommitted all the things that I did. So now I'm thinking all those things that I made when I left you. that I do for my things, all the things that I made when I left you.
From this point out, folks, you'll hear his music become more sophisticated. Much more popular, and he soared straight to the top of the charts. Technically, that was a bad song, and the pitch was way too high for Buddy's voice. But the rest is history.
Oh, girl, on my mind, please come back to me. I love you with all my heart, with you. I want you, to be near me. Is that too much to ask? Oh, my mind, please say you will be mine. You're the one.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, was the first manifestation of that stuttering, strolling tremolo that later was to appear in Peggy Sue and bring Buddy Holly, probably the greatest group of fans that any rock and roll star has ever had.
You're mine to have and to love. No one could ask for more. You're mine to do so. On my mind, please say you will be mine.
And now, one of Gary Bourgeois' favorites coming up, and check it out.
But I'm just a poor young boy. I need girls to drive me wild. I'm just a poor young boy. I need girls to drive me wild. I'm just a poor young boy. I need girls to drive me wild. The way they rock and roll and hold me in your child. The way they laugh, the way they sing, make my heart go tingling. The way they laugh, the way they sing, make my heart go tingling. Make my heart go tingling. Tingling, 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 tingling. The way they sing makes my heart go tingling. The way they laugh, the way they sing makes my heart go tingling. The way make my heart go tingling. Tingling, 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 tingling.
Only on Classic Radio, the way you always wished it could be. 101.1 Eager. The great Buddy Holly.
someone new to go through life with you.
These next three cuts, ladies and gentlemen, were made on 15 November 1956 in Bradley's Barn in Nashville, Tennessee.
Rock to the rhythm and the blues tonight. Rock is everything gonna be alright. So tonight we're gonna rock to the rhythm and the blues. Well, I got a little gal called Olive, come from Memphis, Tennessee. And tonight we're gonna rock around with Olive, Olive says she's gonna do me right tonight. I'm gonna wear my blue suede shoes tonight. And tonight we're gonna rock around with Olive. Well, rock to the rhythm and the blues tonight. Rock is everything gonna be alright. And tonight we're gonna rock to the rhythm and the blues. Hey!
You can hear him clearly continuing to develop that famous Buddy Holly sound that was to manifest itself at its peak later in Peggy Sue.
Everything's gonna be alright in the night. We're gonna rock to the rhythm and the blues. I'm gonna shout, laugh, holler, and a giggle tonight. I'm gonna shake it just a little in the middle of the night. So tonight we're gonna rock around with Olive, Well, hey, Mr. Cop, look out tonight. He's trying to put a stop to me tonight. So tonight we're gonna rock around with Olive, Well, rock to the rhythm and the blues tonight. Rock is everything gonna be alright in the night. We're gonna rock to the rhythm and the blues. Everything's gonna be alright tonight. We're gonna rock to the rhythm and the blues.
Modern Don Juan, he wasn't. But a rock and roll star, he was.
I'm not born in love. They say I'm the only one. They say I'm a modern Don Juan. Well, I ain't for one thing for me. I got a girl and she changed me, but I want only to make her mine. Well, she thinks I'm just ending her life. Oh, I love her so. I never, ever let her go.
Buddy Holly. I'm William Cooper, and this is The Hour of the Time on the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network.
I'm the only one. They say I'm a modern Don
It's Monday night. It's a beautiful day in Eager, Arizona, and everybody in the world is listening to the hour of the time.
You are my one desire. You set my heart on fire. Your eyes, your lips, and your smile, they make my life so worthwhile. You never know how much I love you. If you will be my home, I will be there. You are my one desire. You set my heart on fire. You never know how much I love you. If you will be my home, I will be there. You are my one desire. You set my heart on fire.
This next one you're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, is the best thing that ever happened to every girl named Donna. Made every boy want one of those. Richie Valens. And because of this song is the reason why a lot of people are on this earth today.
Oh, Donna, oh, Donna, oh, Donna, oh, Donna. I had a girl, Donna was her name. Since she left me, I'd never been the same. 'Cause I love my girl.
remember sock hops? I'm talking to everybody that's over 40, folks. I don't know if they have sock hops anymore. We used to have this big glass ball on the roof of the gym. Every gym had one, and the coach would always be there to make darn sure that nobody stepped on his basketball court with shoes on. That's why they called them sock hops. They were always held in the gym. Around the basketball court floor, there were tables and chairs to sit on, and everybody danced bare feet or in their socks. It was a great time to be young. And my little comment about the baby boom really wasn't true about that era. You see, when I went to junior high school and high school, I never knew a girl who got pregnant out of wedlock, and I never knew a girl who got married before she graduated. And I'm not exaggerating, ladies and gentlemen. That's how much things have changed. To our great shame. By 1955, Buddy Holly and Bob Montgomery, with bassist Larry Welborn, were incorporating more rock and roll into their act. And they were drawing in particular from the style and actual repertoire of Elvis Presley, whose first records on the Sun label were starting to sell well in and around the South. Buddy Holly and Montgomery, their calling card described their music as Western and bop, were already well known in and around Lubbock, Texas, and they broadcast regularly on radio station KDAV. Owner Dave Stone and one of the station's announcers, High Pockets Duncan, were responsible for promoting many shows in Lubbock, and Holly and Montgomery appeared regularly as local talents supporting artists such as Hank Thompson, Marty Robbins, Ferlin Husky, Webb Pierce, all big attractions at the time, and, of course, the king, Elvis Presley, who was just getting started. On October 14th, 1955, KDAV booked Bill Haley into Lubbock on a show which also included Jimmy Rogers' Snow, Hank Snow's son, and Buddy, Bob, and Larry. Nashville booking agent Eddie Crandall was traveling with the show and was impressed with Holly's act. By this time, Holly was performing a mixture of country material, on which he doubled with Bob Montgomery, with some rock and roll songs which he sang alone. Crandall saw Holly again several weeks later when the group opened the show for Marty Robbins, whom Crandall managed, and was again impressed. In December, he wrote to Dave Stone at KDAV, "Dave, I'm very confident I can do something as far as getting Buddy Holly a recording contract. Marty Robbins also thinks Buddy has what it takes, so all we can do is try." And the very next day, a telegram arrived at KDAV addressed to Stone. The message from Crandall read, "Have Buddy Holly cut 4 original songs on acetate. Don't change his style at all. Get these to me as soon as possible. Airmail special." Well, folks, history has obscured exactly which 4 songs Holly cut in response to the telegram, but it is probable that 2 of them were "Love Me" and "Don't Come Back Knockin'," though not the versions that you just heard. Both were co-written by Holly and a local Lubbock girl, Sue Parrish. Crandall played the acetate discs to Jim Denny, an important figure in Nashville, who had previously booked acts for the Grand Ole Opry radio show and who had recently set up his own song publishing company. The result was an offer, and the offer resulted in history. Decca Records wanted to record Buddy Holly. Paul Cohen wanted him to sign with his label, but as the company was looking for solo artists and not duos, Bob Montgomery was not included in the offer. Although Holly was reluctant to accept a deal that excluded Montgomery, he was persuaded that he should buy Montgomery himself, and the first sessions were set up. Holly had no trouble in forming a band to take with him to record in Nashville. Sonny Curtis, who had played fiddle with Holly on many country sessions and live dates, was an excellent guitarist who was able to play in the same style as Scotty Moore had done on Elvis Presley's early discs, which Holly greatly admired. Larry Wellborn, like Montgomery, dropped out because he was still in school and too young to travel to Nashville, so his place was taken by Don Guest, one of Holly's school contemporaries who had played with him from time to time. Holly would have added Jerry Allison, a long-standing friend and an excellent drummer, to the lineup, but Allison, too, was still in school and unable to make the trip. As I remember, says Sonny Curtis, we left for Nashville in a bit of a hurry. Buddy was driving a new Oldsmobile then. There was Don Guest and Buddy and me, and we strapped Don's bass to the top of the car. It was a long trip, and on the way back we were practically broke. I remember we stopped at an aunt's of Buddy's in East Texas so we could get a decent meal. The first session was on January the 26th, 1956, and took place in a studio known as Bradley's Barn on what was then 16th Avenue South. It was one of the very few independent studios in Nashville at the time and was conveniently across the street from Jim Denny's Cedarwood music offices. On this first session, although Curtis and Guest were allowed to play, Holly was replaced on rhythm guitar by Grady Martin, a well-respected session musician, in order to allow Holly to concentrate on his own vocal performance and to allow Martin to supply a strong and dominant rhythm, as there was no drummer on this session. The four titles made were Love Me, Don't Come Back Knockin', Midnight Shift, and Blue Days, Black Nights. Several weeks later, on April 16th, Holly's first single was released, Blue Days, Black Nights, and on the flip side, Love Me. Although the record didn't make the charts, it was not a complete flop, and it was even released in Britain in July. At the time, Holly wrote to an agent, "They said my record was very popular around Washington, D.C. and through Missouri," and both Sonny Curtis and Jerry Allison remember their excitement on seeing the record on a jukebox later the same year when they returned to Nashville for their second session. Gene Vincent, who had recently cut Bebop-A-Lula in the same studio that Holly was using, once told how he first met Holly. "I went back to the hotel, and there was this fella sitting there in the lobby who came up to me and said, 'Excuse me, can I get your autograph?' And I said, 'Haven't I seen you someplace before?' And he said, 'Yeah, my name's Buddy Holly.' He had a record out then called Blue Days, Black Nights. It was a fabulous record. The lack of success discouraged Holly a bit, but the release did help him to get work further afield. From Lubbock, that is, in the southeastern states with artists such as Sonny James and Farron Young, both big stars at the time, and it was on such tours that he began to acquire a stage presence necessary for a budding rock and roll star. The second session in Nashville on July 22nd was musically a more successful affair, partly because of drummer Jerry Allison's presence. Both Rock Around with Ollie V, Track 1, Side 2, and Ting-a-Ling are regarded as some of Holly's finest work of the period. While this session also produced an early version of That'll Be the Day, Holly and Allison had written this last song around a catchphrase John Wayne had used in the film The Searchers, and later, in a remade version, the song was to be Holly's very first hit. However, all 5 songs cut in July remained unissued for the time being. And according to Sonny Curtis, the session almost never took place at all. Don Guest had no bass and had arranged to borrow one. But as Sonny remembers, "We were going to use somebody's bass, but when we arrived at the session, it wasn't there. It was up at WSM, and we had to go up there real quick and get that bass, or we weren't going to get to record that day or ever again, as a matter of fact." Jerry reckons he, meaning Owen Bradley, wanted to go water skiing, and he gave us 20 minutes to round up that bass. By all accounts, Holly got on well with Owen Bradley and Jim Denny, but Paul Cohen, the label chief, was dubious of Holly's talent. He once called Holly the biggest no-talent I have ever worked with, which may help explain why nothing from the July session was issued. No doubt the age gap was a hindrance for Holly and the group had no one in Nashville to relate to. As Jerry Allison remembers, back on those dates, I don't even remember which guy was Paul Cohen and which guy was Owen Bradley or who the engineers were. It was like they were the biggies and we were just dips. We didn't groove with them or anything. We were sort of just afraid of them. Sonny Curtis said, in Nashville, we just stayed at the motel and didn't hang around with anybody. Just sort of hung with ourselves or hung up at Marty Robbins' office and chased chicks. Holly and Allison were particularly pleased with their composition of That'll Be the Day. Although the recording was in too high a key for Holly to be comfortable with it, Mickey Sullivan explains. Webb Pierce had said to Buddy, if you want to be a hit, sing high. And he sang extremely high, completely out of pitch. It was above his voice range and he knew it. And he wasn't happy with it. Jerry Allison said, it seems like Owen Bradley said that was the worst song he'd ever heard. And Sonny Curtis had this to say about the whole thing. Yeah, all the engineers thought that was the worst one, which technically it was, but there was this one kid there who swept up the studio, I think, and we got that kid out in the alley and said, hey, which one did you like? And he said, man, I like That'll Be the Day. And we said, yeah, you're so right. On the next and final session in November, Holly was accompanied not by his own group, but by session musicians. One of the 3 songs recorded was a remake of an earlier title from the July session. Ironically, it was not That'll Be the Day. They remade but Rock Around with Ollie V. Yet despite the added talent of Boots Randolph on saxophone and Grady Martin on lead guitar, the session was comparatively fruitless. A second single was issued at Christmas, coupling modern Don Juan with You Are My One Desire, and that record also had no success. The origins of the remaining tracks are not certain, but it seems more than likely that they were recorded privately by Holly in Norman Petty's studio in Clovis, New Mexico, during the early months of 1956, particularly in the case of in the case of I'm Gonna Set My Foot Down and Rock-a-Bye Rock as demos to send to Nashville for submission for future sessions. These demos remained unissued until several years after Holly's death, when they were released in stereo with added accompaniment overdubbed by the Fireballs under the supervision of Norman Petty. There are various theories, ladies and gentlemen, as to why Holly's first commercial recordings were unsuccessful. I mean, you've been listening to them since the beginning of this broadcast today. This is hot stuff. There is no doubt that after his early success around Lubbock and his subsequent signing by one of the country's major labels, who after all were having success with Billy Haley, Holly was disappointed not to have made it. In some cases, he may have rubbed people the wrong way, as Jerry Allison suggests. He always knew what he wanted, and if somebody didn't do it like he wanted it done, there would be conflict. You see, Buddy was never meek, and Don Guest substantiated it. He said Buddy was very temperamental at times. He definitely wanted his own way. Mr. Denny and his wife had a lot to do with holding Buddy down as far as temper was concerned in sessions. The facts of the matter are, however, that the ingredients were wrong. You see, Holly's group was first class, and Sonny Curtis remembers how flattered he was that on the first session he was allowed to play lead guitar, while Grady Martin, a top session player, played only rhythm. But nobody really knew what to do with Holly. Sonny Curtis remembered nobody messed with us at all, told us how they wanted it to sound. They just turned on the mics and let us go. They weren't really into rock and roll, and they didn't know what to do. They knew it was happening, and they just wanted a rock and roll artist, and they didn't have a clue as to how rock and roll should sound, because everything in Nashville was still basically country. Owen Bradley, one of the industry's most respected producers, admits, "I'll tell you what happened. Paul Cohen and I felt we should record him country. But Paul said, look, just call our regular guys and do country. We'd go in to record him, but Buddy had a feeling to go in a different direction. He heard a different drummer." Referring to the later recording of That'll Be the Day, he confesses, "I don't know whether Decca dropped him or not, but he turned up with us on Brunswick, which was a subsidiary of Decca. This time he was doing it the way he heard it, and this is the way it should have been done in the beginning. It was good to see that happen. He proved he was right. But see, we had no real experience doing what I call rock. That was sort of a disaster, I guess," and then he laughed. Well, whatever the reasons, ladies and gentlemen, Holly undoubtedly learned a lot from his experiences in Nashville. Had the recordings been hits, only 2 singles were ever released at the time, then Holly might have been forced, like so many other rock and roll stars, to stick to the formula that brought him that success and to remain in a musical environment that discouraged change. As luck was to have it, success was nearer his home in Lubbock than Nashville. For Holly, convinced that That'll Be the Day had hit potential, decided to try things another way, and within weeks of his last Nashville session was planning to make the 100-mile journey from Lubbock to Clovis, New Mexico, to the studio owned by Norman Petty. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you don't touch that dial, because you're not going to hear any broadcast like this anywhere else in the world. This is the hour of the time. I'm William Cooper, and the star is Buddy Holly.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you don't leave, you know it's a lie. Oh, that'll be the day when I die. Well, you need to all your love and the hurt and love and all your hug and kisses and your money too. Well, you know you love me, baby. Do you tell me maybe that someday we'll all be through? Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you don't leave, you know it's a lie. Oh, that'll be the day when I die. When you make me cry, you say you don't leave, you know it's a lie. Oh, that'll be the day when I die. Well, when you get shot at dark, you shot it at your heart, so it will never part and I leave you. You take and hold me and you tell me boldly that someday, well, I'll be through. Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you don't leave, you know it's a lie. Oh, that'll be the day when I die. Well, that'll be the day. That'll be the day. That'll be the day. That'll be the day.
Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, and that was the day, because that song made Buddy Holly.
Laying at home, waiting for you, just won't get it, 'cause you say we do. Well, I'm looking for someone to love. I'm looking for someone to love. Well, if you're not here, I don't care, 'cause I'm looking for someone to love. Playing the field all day long, since I found out I was wrong. Well, I'm looking for someone to love. I'm looking for someone to love. Well, if you're not here, I don't care, 'cause I'm looking for someone to love. me and another one too. Well, I'm looking for someone to love. Yeah, I'm looking for someone to love. Well, it's not you, baby. I don't care, 'cause I'm looking for someone to love. Some man, street talk, foot slip, there you are. Well, I'm looking for someone to love. I'm looking for someone to love. Well, it's not you, baby. I don't care, 'cause I'm looking for someone to love. 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 I'm looking for someone to love.
Oh, I almost didn't make it back. The next one, Last Night. But it wasn't.
Last night, as I watched the stars from my window, I prayed, Lord above, to guide and protect you. Though I'm not what it now, I still love you somehow. That's my only prayer for you. Last night, as I gazed through the mist in my eyes, I wanted you here to hold you so near, but silence tells me you didn't hear my plea. I miss you so much since you left me. My heart aches apart since you left me. So I'm not.
This is the Voice of Freedom. Listening to the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network with studios in Eager, Arizona, broadcasting on satellite GE1, transponder 7.56 audio, and over 700 FM stations across the nation and around the world.
This is my daddy's station. I'm Pooh, classic radio like you always wished it could be. 101.1 FM, Eager.
You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special memorial presentation honoring three of this nation's greatest rock and roll stars. J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper. Richie Valenzuela, whose professional name was Richie Valens. Charles Holly, whom we all know as the great Buddy Holly. And so we're playing every single record that Buddy Holly ever cut during his entire career tonight. Most of these records, most of you have never heard and would never have heard had this broadcast never taken place. And I hope you're enjoying it, because I certainly am. Now, without any further ado, let's get back to the music, because that's really what it's all about.
My heart aches apart since you left me. Though I'm not quoted now, I still love you somehow. That's my only prayer for you. Last night, my friend told me.
Oh, me. Where are we? Oh, okay. Maybe Baby. This is one of the greats, folks.
It's money for me, please don't care. You never listen to my prayer. Baby, you will love me someday. Well, you are the one that makes me glad, and you are the one that makes me glad. Someday you want me, I'll be there, waiting. Baby, I'll have you. Baby, I'll have you for
Well, you can tell, I guess, that that's not the one that became the big hit. You're going to hear earlier versions of all of the biggest Buddy Holly records right here on 101.1 FM, Eager, and the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network.
Hold me close and tell me how you feel. Tell me love is real. Words of love you wish to talk and true. Darling, I love you. Let me hear you say the words I want to hear. Darling, when you're near. love you with the softest wind. Darling, I love
And here it is, folks, the one you've been waiting for. There really was a Peggy Sue, ladies and gentlemen, and she was around every day.
Every day it's getting closer, going faster than a roller coaster.
At least for a while.
Years will surely come my way. Hey, hey, hey. Every day it's getting faster. Everyone could go unmeasure. Love like yours will surely come my way. Hey, hey, hey. Every day seems a little longer. Every way love's a little stronger. Come what may, do you ever long for true love from me? Every day it's getting closer, going faster than a roller coaster. Love like yours will surely come my way. Hey, hey, hey. Every way, love's a little stronger. Come what may, do you ever long for true love from me? Every day, it's getting closer, going faster than a roller coaster. Love like yours will surely come my way. Hey, hey, hey. Love like yours will surely come my way.
Hey, hey. That made Buddy Holly rich. as a young man. If a country boy from Lubbock, Texas can be a great rock and roll star, and if I can be a DJ on this radio broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, and if you've all got the same size brain and the same opportunities, just think what you can do.
Bring me no more Wonderland is all I can do.
Of course, nobody wants you to know that.
Only one sad line told me she's no longer mine. Mr. Mailman, that will do for some like never before, so hard, couldn't try no more. Shoot, mailman, stay away from my door. Mailman, bring me no more blues. Mailman, bring me no more blues. Is all I can do.
Oh, boy.
After all, another fella took you, but I still can't overlook you. I'm gonna do my best to hook you. After all said and done, you're gonna say you'll miss me. You're gonna say you'll kiss me. You're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. It's gonna happen someday. You're gonna see things my way. You're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. You're gonna tell me a sweet thing. You're gonna make my heart sing. You're gonna hear those bells ring, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. After all, another fella took you, but I still can't overlook you. I'm gonna do my best to hook you. After all is said and done, you're gonna say you'll miss me. You're gonna say you'll kiss me. You're gonna say you'll love me, 'cause I'm gonna love you too. I'm gonna love you too. I'm gonna love you too.
You're listening to the best and all that Buddy Holly ever recorded during his career.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be. Are you gonna give your love to me? I wanna love you night and day. You know my love will not fade away. Oh, well, you know my love will not fade away. My love is bigger than the Cadillac. I try to show it when you're driving me back. Your love for me got to be real. For you to know just how I feel. A love for real, not fade away.
Classic radio, like you always wished it could be. 101.1 FM, Eager.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be. Are you gonna give your love to me? I love to last more than one day. I love it, love and not fade away. I love it, love and not fade away.
Well, folks, we're not even halfway through. What do you think about that? I mean, we've got a long time to go. A lot of hours still ahead of us. We're going to take a break in about 35 minutes so that you can hear the Jackie Patru program. And we would have preempted that broadcast tonight, but she is making her debut on a couple of new affiliates, and we certainly don't want to lose out on that. It's important not only for Jackie Patru, but for the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network. After his contract with Decca in Nashville had lapsed in late 1956, Buddy Holly and Jerry Allison continued to develop their musical partnership, and it was during the ensuing months that the two perfected the fusion, which was later to be the backbone of all of the Crickets' activities. Jerry Allison, Buddy's guitar playing influenced my drumming more than anything. I learned to play drums with what Buddy played. We played together so much because we used to just sit around and rehearse for no reason, just to be playing. I knew how he was going to play it, and he knew how I was going to play. He and I used to play dances, not even a bass player, and he would play chord lead. He wouldn't play just single string things like was normal. That was the most different thing about the whole Buddy Holly and the Crickets thing. What Buddy played on the guitar, we had to fill up all the holes in the music. It was during these few months that Holly and Allison taped many of their practice sessions, either at the Hollies' home or in Larry Holly's garage. And of course, they played many live dates as well. Soon, Holly and Allison determined to make another demo of That'll Be the Day, in the hope of interesting one of the major record companies, including possibly Roulette Records in New York. Jerry Allison said this: Buddy Knox had Party Doll. That was doing great, and we said, well, how come he can do it and we can't do it? We finally got involved with Buddy Knox's guitar player's sister, who lived in Lubbock. She called us and wanted us to play on some demos because she said, I'm going to send these records to Roulette. And we said, well, hey, we'll cut some and you send them to Roulette for us. In fact, Buddy Knox's hit Party Doll was made in the studio owned by Norman Petty, about 100 miles away in Clovis, New Mexico. And so it was to Clovis that on February the 25th, 1957, Holly, Allison, together with bassist Larry Wellborn and friend Nicky Sullivan, went to record a demo of That'll Be the Day. Holly had already worked out a new arrangement for the song, which now was to include background vocals in an attempt to give it a more polished sound than the earlier version made in Nashville. The normal Petty trio had already had several successful singles cut in Petty's own studio, most notably Moon Indigo with his wife Vi on vocals and Almost Paradise. We didn't build the studio for other people. We built it to record our own trio. But later, after other people discovered there was such a studio with excellent equipment in Clovis, they started coming in. Unlike later Crickets recordings, when background vocals were added later, That'll Be the Day was recorded all at the same time, remembers Larry Wellborn. We had worked on That'll Be the Day for a long time, along with those singers, but even when we went up to Clovis, it seems to me like we spent hours on it, just recording it over and over. Buddy had worked out the arrangement ahead of time, but Norman Petty had us run through it again and again, trying to make sure it was perfect. However perfect it was, Roulette turned the record down, thinking it too similar to those of Buddy Knox and Jimmy Bowen, and it was only then that Petty stepped in and offered to help by playing the tapes to contacts he had established through his own success in New York. After another rejection from Mitch Miller at Columbia, Petty finally got a release from Bob Thiel, then running the Brunswick and Coral labels, ironically subsidiaries of Decca Records, who not a year previously had terminated Holly's contract. Success was still a far-off hope, and between the recording of this new version of That'll Be the Day and its release in the last week of May, Holly, Allison, Sullivan, and Joe B. Malden continued to rehearse, play live dates, and make more recordings with Norman Petty. The Crickets' first live date, which was before the release of That'll Be the Day, was in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Nicky Sullivan remembers it vividly. Norman got us a booking in Carlsbad at the VFW Hall on the strength of Buddy's Decca recordings. Nobody went to Carlsbad as an entertainer, so the place was packed. When we got there, the place was packed with kids until we looked upstairs, and it was all adults. We felt really ill at ease because this was our first performance publicly. But we went out and performed for a good 3 hours, and we had the place rocking. You couldn't have heard Joe B. because we had muted instruments, so Jerry and Buddy really carried the show. Regardless, the show must have been a success, for the group made front-page headlines the next day. The headlines said this: Buddy Holly and the Crickets break up Carlsbad. Not bad for a young country boy from Lubbock, Texas, even if it was Carlsbad, New Mexico. Joe Malden also has fond memories of the event, too. Buddy and Jerry came by one day. They had a job in Carlsbad to play a dance, and they needed a bass player for that night, and so I accepted the job, and on the way back, Buddy asked me if I wanted to play regular with him. He said, "We've cut a record called That'll Be the Day, and it's going to be a stone hit." In fact, although it took 13 long weeks from the day they recorded That'll Be the Day to the day it was issued, it was a further 10 weeks before the record showed in the bottom reaches of the American Top 100. It did, however, allow the group to stockpile, if unintentionally, enough material for future use. Norman Petty. Buddy was in the studio all the time. I was recording other people at the time, too, but it would have suited him fine if I'd just dropped everything and just recorded Buddy. He would have been there 24 hours a day. Buddy's brother, Larry Holly, says, "Everything Buddy did with a sense of urgency. That he wasn't going to have a lot of time. He didn't slow down at all. I think it was because he was doing what he wanted to do more than anything in this world." Jerry Allison. "We just sort of hung around. We could record any time we wanted. It wasn't a thing where you go in for 3 hours and quit because we could record for 5 minutes if we wanted to, then knock off for 3 hours and then record more." The first titles to be cut in Clovis after That'll Be the Day, I'm Looking for Someone to Love, were Last Night and a demo of Maybe Baby, recorded on 12th March and a couple of weeks after Joe Malden had joined the group. Next came Words of Love, the first recording on which Holly double-tracked his voice and guitar, and as Jerry remembers, Buddy had 2 guitar parts worked out before we even started to record that. I don't know how he got the idea, but he planned to do it that way. According to John Goldrosen, Holly Petty and the Crickets spent at least 6 hours on the tune, working out the overdubbing by a process of trial and error, trying to achieve the balance and sound Holly wanted. And by all accounts, the sun was rising before the session was over. Fortunately, Petty's studio had a small area in an adjacent room where the boys could rest or sleep after a particularly long recording session, and of course, this saved them the inconvenience of the long ride back to Lubbock when things were going well. Nicky, I remember Words of Love. That was tough. I finally went to sleep on the couch about 4 in the morning. I think they finished it after that. That session went from 8 in the morning till about 6 or 7 the following morning. Jerry's calendar for 1957 indicates that one session that started on June 29th did not end until the early hours of July the 1st. However, the approach seems to have worked, for it was this marathon that produced not only both sides of Holly's third solo single, Listen to Me, and I'm Gonna Love You Too, but also the Crickets' second smash hit, Oh Boy, and probably Holly's most remembered release under his own name, entitled Peggy Sue. There is no doubt that Peggy Sue rates as possibly Holly's greatest recording, and the way this track was recorded is probably typical of most Clovis sessions. Originally known as Cindy Lou after Holly's young niece, it had a slower tempo and a Latin beat, far removed from the final master. Nicky Sullivan said, but it didn't sound right with the cha-cha beat. It had no class. Then Jerry said, let's put my girl's name to it, which was Peggy Sue. But that was hard to do until Buddy said to Jerry, why don't you put paradiddles to it, which is a drummer's beat that they use when they are taking lessons. With these changes, the group ran through the song, but Allison's drums were far too loud and were spoiling the sound balance. So for this session, Jerry was moved out into the lobby of the studio. From there, Petty ran the microphone wires through the echo chamber and achieved the in-and-out echo effect of the drums by manually raising and lowering the volume and amount of echo in time with the music to give the recording its unique and hypnotic sound. There was one other problem. Holly's now legendary guitar break in the middle required him to flick the pickup switch on his guitar, which he could not accomplish without stopping playing, which would have interrupted the flow of the song. Sullivan remembers how they did it. I was in the same room playing rhythm guitar, the same exact part along with Buddy, and it wasn't coming out on the tape. Buddy couldn't switch from rhythm to lead fast enough without breaking rhythm. He couldn't get his hand to the switch fast enough, and it showed up on tape. So we stopped and redid it with me pushing the switch on Buddy's guitar. On the next take, we did it. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Norman Petty's recollection confirms the speed with which Peggy Sue was finally recorded. We had been working for a couple of days on various cuts, and I think the boys were going to put me on because they knew I was tired. So Buddy said, let's record some more. I don't want to go to bed. So I said, okay. So at about 5:30 that morning, Buddy said, let's write a song about Jerry's girlfriend. It was about 5:30 that morning, and I think about 9:30 we had the completed master. So it really was a quick thing. And as Jerry Allison says, we were all pretty flipped out about that one. We said, man, that's weird. That's different. It sounds good. The flip side of Peggy Sue was every day, and as Norman Petty recalls, was more time-consuming than usual. Every day took us a long time because I played Celeste on it. I would have to go in and set the level, walk back into the studio and hit the recorder, so it made it a little bit time-consuming. The recording is also unusual from the point of view of Jerry Allison's performance. While Holly was demonstrating the song during the run-through, Jerry started to join in, improvising by slapping his knees, and the sound appealed to Holly. So the only drumming on the recording is Jerry Allison slapping his knees. This leisurely pace in Clovis was to change noticeably when That'll Be the Day started to climb the charts, and climb it did. And thereafter, many sessions were cut out of Clovis, either in New York or even on the road during the hectic touring schedule that the Crickets now undertook. During August of 1957, the group undertook their first touring engagements, culminating in a week-long stint at the Paramount Theater in Brooklyn. The tour included a week at the Apollo Theater, which by 1957 presented almost exclusively black artists. For ironically, the promoters of the tour had confused the Crickets with another black vocal group of the same name. After appearances on the Alan Freed TV show and the Paramount dates, along with other artists such as Larry Williams, Little Richard, the Dell Vikings, and the Moonglows, all black artists, the group embarked on a grueling 80-day tour, culminating on December the 1st in an appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. After a short break and a visit back to Lubbock, the Crickets were back in New York, minus Nicky Sullivan, who left to pursue his own career, for the Alan Freed Christmas holiday shows at the Paramount Theater. New York sharing billing with Fats Domino, the Everly Brothers, Danny and the Juniors, and Paul Anka. This heavy schedule was to continue until May of the next year, 1958, with breaks only for a few days' rest or in instances when white artists were forbidden to appear on the same shows as black ones. Recalls Nicky Sullivan, "We hit the Mason-Dixon line and it was a whole new ballgame. There were 116 of us on tour, both black and white, and the biggest problem we had was going into New Orleans out of Atlanta. At the county line, we were met by 2 patrol cars, and they forced the buses off the road, and they informed us that in New Orleans there is no way that blacks and whites are going to appear on the same programming. So they put all the blacks on one bus, that's 96 people, and they put all the whites on the other bus, that's 20 people, and from there we were escorted into town. The blacks were taken to one hotel, the whites were taken to another, and then we were informed we could not appear on the same show." It was during this enforced break on the road that the Crickets and Petty took advantage of the situation and met up in Oklahoma City, where their touring schedules coincided, to record several titles to complete an album required to capitalize on the success. "That'll Be the Day" was having. Norman Petty. "At the time, my trio were playing Oklahoma City, and Buddy had 2 days off, so he stopped by and we recorded major soundtracks in one corner of the Officers Club one night, and Buddy continued on the road, and I took the tape back and added the background voices in Echo and New Mexico. Nicky Sullivan remembers the event clearly. We did 4 sides there. Maybe Baby was the biggest thing to come out of that session. It was the only track I played lead guitar with Buddy Duplicate along with him. Most of the remaining tracks were recorded in Clovis between May and July of 1957, mainly to complete either of the only 2 albums ever released during Holly's own lifetime, The Chirping Crickets and Buddy Holly. It was to complete the latter that a rather hurried morning session in New York was set up, immediately before departing for tours of Hawaii, Australia, and later Great Britain. The session took place on the morning of January the 26th, 1958. The group were to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show in the afternoon, and the song scheduled for cutting was Rave On. It had previously been recorded unsuccessfully by one of its original composers, Sonny West, but as Norman Petty says, it was a real hillbilly number, brought to me by Sonny West and Bill Tideman. I was playing the tape in the control room, and Buddy came in and said, "I rather like that melody, but it's a real hillbilly thing." So I said, "Would you like to do it if we changed the lyrics?" So Buddy said, "Sure." As this was not a Clovis session, and a rather hurried one at that, the opportunity for recording the background voices later was lost, and the recording was all done together in only a couple of takes. Despite the song's inauspicious origins and the unfamiliar studio surroundings, Holly created that cold winter morning one of his most celebrated and successful recordings. As a young man, ladies and gentlemen, I lived in Midwest City, Oklahoma. My father was an Air Force officer stationed at Tinker Air Force Base. I remember that recording session, ladies and gentlemen. It was the 27th and 28th of September 1957 at the Officers Club on Tinker Air Force Base near Oklahoma City. I was in the audience. Now you're going to hear some of the same exact music that I heard and saw performed by Buddy Holly and the Crickets. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. We got a long time to go.
Go, man, go. I got a gal that I love, so I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll on the flat top catching out the dungaree job. I'm headed for the gym to the sock hop ball. Going to really jump in the catch, it's going wild. In the greatest of mountains, great style, I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll. To the corner, pick up my sweet pie. Rock and roll, baby, she's the apple of my eye. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll. My shoes roll up my faded jeans. The rock and roll baby coming on the scene. Shuffle to the left, the shuffle to the right. Gonna rock and roll to the early night. I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready. Ready, 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 I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll.
Oh, boy.
All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the whole world will see that you are what I miss from me. All of my life I've been waiting, tonight there'll be no hesitating, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the whole world will see that you are what I miss from me. Stars appear and the shadows are falling, and you can hear my heart calling. A little bit of love in my drill will bring the right. I'm gonna keep my baby tonight. All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the world can see that you are what I miss for me. You don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the world can see that you are what I meant for me. All my life I've been waiting, tonight there'll be no hesitating, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the world can see that you are what I meant for me. Stars appear and the shadows are falling, and you can hear my heart calling. A little bit of love makes everything right. I'm gonna see my baby tonight. All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy. When you're with me, oh boy, the whole world will see that you are what I meant for me.
February 3rd, 1959, Buddy Holly died in a plane crash along with the Big Bopper and Richie Valens. This is a memorial broadcast, and we'll go until we played every recording that Buddy Holly ever did in his entire short life.
Tell me how you keep the love within your heart for me. Don't you know that I love you? Let me show my blue. When I know that love is true, don't need your love from me. If you would say to me today, the time for love is now. Could I waste your love my way? And I'd say, tell me how. Tell me how to keep your love. You know how I need your love. Tell me how to keep the love within your heart from me. my way, then I say, tell me how to keep your love. You know how I need your love. Tell me how you keep the love within your heart from me. Tell me how you keep the love within your heart from me.
I was in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, with a young girl named Beverly Beard, who I was deeply in love with when this record was recorded.
Maybe, baby, I'll have you. Maybe, baby, you'll be true. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me. It's funny, honey, you don't care. You never listen to my prayers. Maybe, baby, you will love me someday. Well, you are the one that makes me glad, and you are the one that makes me sad. When someday you want me, well, I'll be there waiting to see you. Maybe, baby, I'll have you. Maybe, baby, you'll be true. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me. Well, you are the one that makes me glad, and the other one that makes me sad. When someday you want me, well, I'll be there waiting and see. Maybe, baby, I'll have you. Maybe, baby, you'll be true. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me. Maybe, baby, I'll have you for me.
Oh, what a rush that is, folks. I was only 13 years old at the time. Wow.
Some love. Baby, I pray. How can I love you when you're far away? Send me your kisses, baby, my dear, so I can hold you. Please run me. Can't you send me your kisses? I can see your touch. I need you so badly. I miss you so much. My days are so lonely. My nights are so blue. I'm near and I'm lonely. I'm waiting for you. Can't you send me your kisses? I can feel that love. I miss you so badly. I need you so much. My days are so lonely. My nights are so blue. I'm near and I'm lonely. I'm waiting for you.
Buddy Holly had a style and a sound all of his own that's never been duplicated by anyone before or since.
Little baby, baby me. Little baby, baby me. In my heart you are the one. Look around and have your fun. Whoa, 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 you be my little baby and baby me. Little baby, can you see what your love has done to me? Can you see love in my eyes? Love that leaves me full sight. Whoa, 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 you be my little baby and baby me.
Don't touch that dial. Classic radio like you've always wished it could be. 101.1 Eager.
Little baby, say to me. Little baby, baby me. Maybe I will, baby, you, with a bunch of love for you. Whoa, 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 you be my little baby, and baby me.
Coming up dinner time for some of you, but bring it in. Listen to this broadcast and take your time.
Take your time, I can't wait for all the love I know will be mine if you take your time. Take your time, though it's late. Heartstrings will sing like a string of twine if you take your time. Take your time and take mine too. I have time to spend. Take your time, go with me through time till all time's in. Take your time, I can't wait for all the love I know will be mine if you take your time. Take your time and take mine too. I have time to spend. Take your time, go with me through time till all I'm here. Take your time, I can't wait for all the love I know will be mine if you take your time. Take your time.
Please stay tuned at the top of the hour for the Jackie Petru program, immediately followed by a continuation of this memorial broadcast honoring the work of Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and of course, the great Buddy Holly. We're going to play every record that Buddy Holly ever made in his entire career. Don't miss a single second of it.
The way you dance and hold me down, the way you dance and say goodnight. Parade on in the parade, baby. I know it's got me feeling when you say I love you. Parade on, well, parade on in the parade, baby. And I know you got me feeling. I'm so glad that you're leaving your love for me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's getting close to that time. This has been a memorable afternoon. You got to hear little Allison's voice debut on the radio. And she was in here earlier dancing with her poppy. We are honoring the work and achievement of Ritchie Valens, the Big Bopper, and the great Buddy Holly, who died all together in a plane crash on February the 3rd, 1959, after leaving a small town, Clear Lake, in Iowa, on the way to South Dakota, where they were going to do another date. South Dakota or North Dakota, I forgot which. Right now, we've got to do this. Coming up is the Jackie Petru program, which immediately following, we will continue this memorial broadcast of the Hour of the Time on the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network. Make sure that you don't miss Jackie Petru, and make double sure that you're back in front of your radio when it's time for us to resume. This is the Voice of Freedom. To the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network, with studios in Eager, Arizona, broadcasting on satellite GE1, transponder 7.56 audio, and over 700 FM stations across the nation and around the world.
This is my daddy's station. I'm Pooh, classic radio like you always wished it could be. 101.1 FM, Eager.